Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. Today we'll be looking at Indian cities that have GDP larger than many countries. Here's a list, and if you're interested, these are our sources. Begin. So these are a list of the 10 richest cities by GDP, and on the 10th spot is Visakhapatnam. Now, Visakhapatnam's GDP is 43 billion or 3.59 lakh crore rupees. Now, some of the countries that we can compare Visakhapatnam's GDP to are Libya, whose GDP is at 41 billion. So Libya's GDP is about 2 billion less than Visakhapatnam. We also have Uganda and Bolivia. Both of these have GDPs of less than Visakhapatnam by about 3 billion. They're both sitting at 40 billion right now. On the ninth spot is Surat. So Surat's GDP is at 59 billion or 4.95 lakh crore. Now, many people may not know this. Some of you, I think, already know this, but Surat is basically called also the diamond city of the world. And the reason being is because diamond export and diamond trade started out in India thousands of years ago. So even today, 90% of diamonds globally are actually cut and polished here in Surat. There's actually also going to be a diamond bourse that's going to be up and coming in about a few years. That complex is actually under construction right now as it expands its global presence. So some of the countries we can compare Surat's GDP to are Uruguay. Uruguay and Surat's GDP are almost the same, almost identical, I would say, at 59 billion. Some of the other mentionable countries which are close enough to Surat's GDP are Azerbaijan, which stands at 54 billion, and Congo, which stands at 53 billion. Now, the eighth spot belongs to Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad's GDP is at 68 billion or 5.62 lakh crore. Now, some of the countries we can compare Ahmedabad to are Belarus. Belarus's GDP is also 68 billion, which is very, very similar to Ahmedabad's. And some of the other mentionable countries are Croatia. Croatia's GDP is at 67 billion, and Tanzania is also at 67 billion. So both of these countries have the GDP of Ahmedabad minus 1 billion. The next on our list is Pune. Now, Pune's GDP is at 69 billion or 5.7 lakh crore. Some of the countries that we can compare Pune's GDP to are Cote d'Ivoire. Again, I don't know how to pronounce this, and pardon my ignorance, but if you can put in the comments on how to actually say it, that would help. Now, this country's GDP and Pune's GDP is very identical. They both are at the $69 billion mark. Some of the mentionable countries are Uzbekistan, which is also at 69 billion, and Costa Rica, which is about 5 billion less than Pune, where Costa Rica sits at 64 billion. The next one is Hyderabad. Hyderabad sits at the 6th spot. The GDP of Hyderabad is at 75 billion or 6.86 lakh crore. Now, some of the countries that we can compare Hyderabad's GDP to are Angola. Angola's GDP is at 72 billion, so it's about 3 billion less than Hyderabad's GDP. Some of the other mentionable ones would be Lithuania and Myanmar, which is actually our neighbor. Lithuania is at 65 billion and Myanmar is at also 65 billion. So they both are actually about $10 billion less than Hyderabad's GDP, but they were the closest we could find on the World Bank site. The next one is Chennai. Chennai is also called, or was also called Madras, and was renamed to Chennai. It's currently sitting at the 5th spot as the 5th richest city in India. The GDP of Chennai is at 78.6 billion, or 7.11 lakh crore rupees. Some of the countries we can compare Chennai's GDP to are Ghana. Ghana's GDP is at 77 billion, so just about a billion and a half less than Chennai's GDP. Some of the mentionables, what we did here is we actually added and actually gave you more of a global perspective. So Chennai's GDP is greater than the sum of the following three countries: Bosnia plus Bahrain plus Mongolia. So if you combine the GDPs of these three countries, they would still be less than Chennai's GDP. Close enough, but still less than Chennai's GDP. On the next one is Bengaluru, which is at the 4th spot. Bengaluru was earlier called Bangalore, and the name was changed to Bengaluru. Now, Bengaluru's GDP in US dollars is 110 billion, which is 9.09 lakh crore rupees. Some of the countries we can compare Bengaluru's GDP to are Kenya. Kenya's GDP is almost identical to the GDP of our city, Bengaluru, sitting at 110 billion. Some of the mentionables are Cuba. Cuba's GDP is about 3 billion less than Bengaluru's GDP at 107 billion. And we also have Ecuador, which sits at 106 billion, so about 4 billion less than Bengaluru's GDP. On the 3rd spot is Kolkata. Now, Kolkata was earlier called Calcutta, but Calcutta was actually a mispronunciation of Kolkata, which is why they went ahead and changed the spelling so it can actually be pronounced properly. The pain they go through. Kolkata's GDP is at 150.1 billion, which comes to about 12.42 lakh crore rupees. Now, some of the countries we can compare Kolkata's GDP to are Morocco. Morocco's GDP is 132 billion. We couldn't really find a country that was at 150th billion spot. The closest we could find was Morocco. We did the same thing here. We basically combined two other countries to see how we can combine these two to build a Kolkata. And if you combine Bulgaria along with Croatia, so Bulgaria plus Croatia, they both will have almost the same GDP as Kolkata, but still Kolkata will have a higher GDP than both of these countries combined. Moving on to the 2nd spot is Delhi. Before I begin and talk about Delhi's GDP, I do want to say that sometimes when we look at GDP, some people may actually look at the entire NCR or the National Capital Region, which is what we're not doing here. Here we are only looking at Delhi. And within Delhi comes New Delhi and Old, but that's about it. So we don't have Noida, we don't have Gurgaon, we don't have any of the NCR areas. We are only looking at Delhi. So Delhi by itself has a GDP of 293.6 billion or 23.99 lakh crore. Now, some of these pictures, unlike some of the other cities, I've actually added some more flavor to it, primarily because there isn't anything called downtown Delhi. Unlike Washington, New York, or any other Western cities, which were built not more than 200 years ago, Delhi has been around for at least 700 years, if not more. And obviously, what that means is that different areas have different purposes for it. So, in the top left-hand corner is where we see the Rashtrapati Bhavan. We also see the PM office is here. All the ministries for Pan-India or India-wide are also here. The Other two pictures that have the buildings show that there's some high rises, even though Delhi doesn't really have that many high rises just yet. It has a lot of land mass as compared to some of the other cities, especially to the one that we compare to as number one. And the last picture that has an Indian flag on it, that area is actually called Connaught Place. So Connaught Place was actually established as a trade area, and which is why if you actually zoom out of that picture, it's actually circular. And you basically have private banks, state-owned banks, and you also have foreign banks along with export and import houses with many boutique shops. So it's actually a very good mix. If you ever go to Delhi, have a look at Connaught Place as well. Some of the countries you can compare Delhi to are Romania. Romania's GDP is at 284 billion. So basically, again, this was the closest I could find with Delhi. But Romania's GDP is about 9 billion less than Delhi's GDP. Portugal's GDP is at 250, let's just round it up to 250 billion. And Iran's GDP is about 231 billion. So both of these have about 40 to 60 billion less than Delhi's GDP, but these are honorary mentions just to see how you can compare one city to a few countries. Does anyone want to guess which is number one? Just say it out loud. I can probably hear you. If you say Mumbai, you're right. So yes, Mumbai is on the top spot. It is the richest city in India. The GDP of Mumbai as a city is 310 billion. In Indian rupees, it comes to about 25.65 lakh crore. Now, similar to the story with Delhi, Mumbai basically was a small fishing village back in the day. A little bit more detail about Mumbai. As you know, that Pakistan and Bangladesh were once part of Bharat, what we call Akhand Bharat, which means United Bharat. In the Akhand Bharat, that is before partition in 1947, Karachi actually was a bigger city than Mumbai. However, after partition, Mumbai has obviously become one of the premier cities in the world. Currently, Mumbai is the 12th richest city in the world. But I also want to talk about some of the other areas of Mumbai. Now, we have limited real estate on our screens, so we are just choosing 4 landmarks, but there are many, many more places that I would encourage you to go look at once you are in Mumbai. Now, the first picture that pops up here is actually the picture of BKC, or the Bandra Kurla complex. Now, Bandra Kurla complex actually has one of the 2 stock exchanges in Mumbai. One is a national stock exchange, which is where I went to get my license in trading for equities and for bonds, but you can get it for derivatives as well. Across the street from the NSE is the SEBI building, which is the regulator. And you also have Bank of America, you have ICICI, you have many different financial institutions here. So this is called the BKC. The other picture that popped up is actually a picture of Sobo. Sobo is short for South Mumbai or South Bombay, because Mumbai was first called Bombay. The reason they changed the name from Bombay to Mumbai is because of Mumbai Devi. So when India was unfortunately taken over by Western forces, they couldn't say Mumbai, so they just called it Bombay, which was a wrong pronunciation. However, the right pronunciation is Mumbai, and therefore it's now spelled that way. This Sobo, or South Bombay or South Mumbai area, actually has the headquarters of State Bank of India. It has the old building of Air India, which is now bought out by Tata. It also has 5-star hotels such as Trident, and so on and so forth. This is the iconic Gateway of India, along with the Taj Hotel. Taj Hotel has two buildings. One is the more majestic building, and the other one that looks like a skyscraper, but they both are the same hotel. And lastly, this is the Sea Link in Mumbai. When I get off the airport in Mumbai, I basically take the Sea Link to get to Kolaba, which is in South Bombay or South Mumbai. And some of the countries we can compare Mumbai to are Finland. Finland's GDP is at 299 billion. So it's about 11 billion less than Mumbai's GDP. Now, just going by some of the common countries that I've heard people that either work in those countries or they would like to visit it, I actually combine them all into one to basically give you a different perspective of Mumbai. So Mumbai's GDP is greater than the sum of Qatar, Kuwait, and Iceland combined. Now, first mention what really Bharat/India is. Bharat is the actual name. India is a name that was given to us by the British because they thought we are indigenous, which obviously we are not. There is actually an open case in the Indian government where people like me have actually put in a request to remove the word India from our constitution and from our name and passports. Anyways, we'll see how that goes. But most people, when they talk about Bharat or when they talk about India, they think, oh, it's so hot, so well, how do you live there? Well, it doesn't really add up because it's a very narrow mind about Bharat or India. And the reason being is because large countries such as India don't actually have any one special type of topography. For example, Iceland is always going to be cold because it's a small country. So is Saudi Arabia is always going to be hot and desert because that's the entire country. India is not like that. India actually has many different types of topographies, and we'll just have a very high level view, and which is why I said one land, many faces. So before we get into that, let's talk about the GDP because that's what we're here for. India's GDP is at 3.53 trillion. It is now the 5th largest GDP in the world. We have just surpassed our colonizers, the British, in September of 2022 to become a larger GDP than them. That comes to 285.75 lakh crore rupees. Now, let's talk about some of the topography. This is Kashmir. As you can see, it's not a hot place. It's actually very beautiful with rolling mountains right at the footsteps of the Himalayas. We also have Kerala, which is actually a very tropical weather. And as you can see, it's actually a beautiful place. If you go to Kerala, there's actually something called backwaters. I would highly recommend that. Google that if you like. We also have a desert, a huge desert actually, in Rajasthan, and parts of Gujarat, which is a neighboring state to Rajasthan, also has a desert, and it's called Kutch. We also have states like Mizoram, which are states in the east of India, and these states are actually higher altitude, so they kiss the skies every morning. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and we will come back to you with more interesting facts and trying to remove the ignorance that people have about India/Bharat. Thank you so much. Namaste. Have a nice day.